All right, so we've got Greg Johnson from a Trilogy talking to us today. He's talking to the Coder Camp students, and we're just going to do a quick Q&A session with Greg. And let's get this started. Greg, one of the first questions the students were wondering was, how can a developer make themselves a more attractive candidate for recruiters? You know, how can they stand out to you guys?
So, I mean, the biggest thing is you've got to be active on LinkedIn. And it's something that it's the same symbol or the same gong that I've been banging lately. And I kind of had an idea recently where, I mean, if you're not comfortable putting out original content or anything like that, just finding articles and reposting them and saying interesting article or something, just so that way you show up in people's feeds and people start liking it and you start getting noticed outside of that. But just being active on LinkedIn is a big deal because there's a lot of people out there, and anything that you can do to kind of show that you are active in the community is huge. Being really active in GitHub early on is also a big deal because it will automatically show that you are contributing and that you stand out from people that might have similar skill set but aren't doing that. So basically just doing those pretty small, fairly easy things sets you high above the competition. So those things, just going to the meetups or the hacker nests or things like that, and just being involved is huge. That's a really big thing that will get you noticed really fast.
Okay, cool. So are we in agreement that LinkedIn is pretty much the most important social media for job seekers, or is there
Yeah,
something?
I mean, there's LinkedIn is huge because that's where a lot of the recruiters, whether staffing or corporate, that's where they hang out. That's where they find a lot of their people. And so if you're on there, basically, I mean, you could, for the most part, copy paste your resume into LinkedIn. So that way, if they do a keyword search, you show up. And when they find you on LinkedIn, if you have been active, they'll be able to see all of your activity or all the posts and things like that. And so doing those things, it'll definitely get you noticed as a lot more than if you're not. And sometimes managers, I've dealt with managers that's almost the first question they ask is, do they have a LinkedIn? Because they want to go and see it. And it's not always, but you don't want to be in a situation where you're in front of a manager and they do ask for it and you don't have it.
Okay. So be active on LinkedIn, post stuff, like things, share stuff, just get your name up in front of people.
Right.
And can you kind of expand a little bit on like what is the benefits of that for the candidate? Just like what can they expect to get out of that? Because for some people they may be like, this doesn't make any sense and it seems pointless, right?
Right. No, and that was me for a long time, actually. Like, I was not the biggest LinkedIn advocate. I had it because it was just the normal thing to do, but I didn't really start using it the right way for a long time. But really, the point of it is, one, you're going to get noticed easier on the job boards like CareerBuilder and Monster and Dice. The only way you get to the top of that list is through keyword searches and things that you might not even know they're looking for.
Okay.
But if they do a keyword search for software developer, .NET developer, or whatever, and you might be the person that pops up because you're consistently putting articles out there or sharing an article or whatever. And it's kind of like the same thing as Google Analytics. You want to be on that first page before anybody else.
Okay.
And so by liking and sharing and getting involved, it doesn't have to be anything too crazy like starting your own blog, because that might be really intimidating to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But just finding an article about a company that's doing something a little bit different with Angular or whatever, and then saying just a quick 2-sentence thing on this is exciting because or whatever. But just that brings you to the top of a lot of minds of a lot of people that you're going to want to know.
Okay. I've got one more LinkedIn question before we leave
Yeah,
the topic, and I feel like this could be its own little Q&A, honestly, now that I
definitely.
think about it.
Yeah.
But a lot of students are coming from different backgrounds,
Hmm.
doing a career pivot, and their LinkedIn is still saying, what they used to be. Some of them are putting student down. Like what I feel like it's fair if you're doing .NET development or web development, I think it's fair to just say my title is web developer now. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. Because if let me give you a background into what a recruiter sees. So if I go to your LinkedIn page and it says student at Coder Camps, that doesn't scream I should reach out to you about a job right now. It screams I should reach out to you after you've gotten a little bit of experience maybe, or it screams I should reach out to you when you graduated. Uh, and so what you could do instead is you could put web developer or junior web developer, whatever you want to put. And you could, I mean, you could, if you're doing stuff on GitHub or if you've built a website or whatever, you could put freelance on there. And that's telling the truth. You don't want to go way outside of what you're actually doing, but you want to show them that, look, I actually know how to do this now. It's not something that I am just learning to do. It's something that I'm actually doing. And if you're able to, I don't know exactly how it works, but if you're able to put your project on LinkedIn, do that, because they'll be able to see, oh, this is what they're actually doing. It's giving them meat to kind of chew on and see, oh, this guy or girl is actually doing
Okay.
this.
Okay. That sounds great. Um, so a lot of students will go through the program. For us, it's a 12-week thing,
Hmm.
but not really do much career stuff till the very end. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's probably too late. But some of them has mentioned they're hesitant to reach out to companies or recruiters during training because some say I don't feel like I have any value to provide yet. I feel like it's okay to start as soon as possible, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are and what the student can probably do before the
Definitely.
graduation comes.
So the biggest thing is th- that thought process is what everybody else is thinking. And so if you don't start the conversation until you graduate, everybody else is doing that. So you want to start the conversation, you want to start the relationship beforehand. And it doesn't have to be, anything real crazy. It's just introducing yourself, sending out the invites on LinkedIn and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. Would love to set up or just connect with you to kind of build that relationship for when I am able to, get into this job, or for when I am officially on the market. Starting those conversations as early on in the process is very, very smart, because you're going to have 12 weeks ahead, 12 weeks of a relationship ahead of all the other graduates that don't.
So you're saying on LinkedIn, maybe just send out connection invites, start conversations with people in the industry. Like what are ways that we can initiate that conversation? Anything that comes to your mind, like questions that we can ask in particular or anything like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, really the thing is, look for recruiters in the area, look for, or even recruiters, not just staffing companies, but also internal recruiters, and say, just reach out to them with an invite. So all you got to do is go in at the top left-hand side of the LinkedIn page, right when you log in. There's a little search bar.
Mhm.
Just type in recruiter.
Okay.
And then it'll pop up with everybody in the whole world that has recruiter on there.
Yeah.
At the kind of middle right hand side of the page, it'll give you the option of figuring out what location they're in. And so just type in Phoenix, and it'll give you Phoenix area. And then just start connecting with them. Send a personalized invite. Don't just send the default. I don't even know what it says exactly, but send
Sure.
something that's thoughtful, because recruiters might get 10, 20, 30, 50 invites in a day. And if a lot of them, because they get that many in a day, they might delete the ones that are just default, and you want to do what you can to stand out. So send a personalized invite to those recruiters or those companies or whatever.
Okay.
Figure out a way of connecting with them. And it doesn't have to be anything real in depth. Just, hey, Greg, noticed that you're recruiting in the tech space, and just want to let you know, that's something that I'm getting into. Would love to connect with you and talk at some point.
Okay. Another interesting question someone threw out. What are some things that will get a resume thrown into the trash bin? And then also, what can make a resume really shine?
So this is something that I kind of touched on before. One of the temptations sometimes is to really, really go into the weeds on formatting and think that you're creating the next Mona Lisa of resumes. And then it gets really jumbled up, and I kind of explained this last time, but when it goes into Dice or Career Builder or Monster or the company's applicant tracking system, because of that formatting, it might come off as one letter per line, and it's just doesn't look good. And so try and keep it kind of basic, so that way it's easy to read. That's probably the biggest thing, is make sure it's easy to read. It's not just a huge block of text either. You want to have bullet points. Don't have 20 bullet points per section or per project or whatever. Just try and keep it to maybe 5-10, and make sure those 5 to 10 bullet points really highlight what you're capable of doing. And the summary section, that's where you can kind of show your your personality a little bit more, and show them that you're more of a human than a robot, or somebody that actually might fit with the team, in things like that. So those are probably the two things. Make sure the formatting is very easy to read, because as a recruiter or a hiring manager, if you see a resume that's not easy to read, you're going to go to the next one that is, and you might not get back to the one that isn't.
Yeah. Okay, so let's kind of talk industry a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering, what tech skills are most in demand, and what trends are you seeing on your end?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different things that are in demand right now. The thing that I'm seeing the most of is a lot of companies are going towards automation. So network engineers or systems engineers, a lot of them are not typical network or systems engineers anymore. They get into that kind of DevOps space, where now they also have to be able to script in and do automation tools and all sorts of different things. So it's interesting because lots of different technologies are starting to blend together, and they're expecting more from the people that come in. And the people that do have a firm grasp of these different technologies, they get paid really, really well, because they're able to understand how to automate networks or whatever. As far as web development and things like that, being able to do the front and back end is great, but being able to really, really understand how to do those unit testings and things like that, to be able to test your own code to make sure that it really, really works, that's a big thing, because coding in itself that's great. A lot of people can code, but how many people are really, really good at testing the code and making sure it works the first time?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. For the automation thing, that one threw me off a little bit, because I didn't realize it was so in demand. What kind of technologies are involved with automation?
So you've got a lot of different things. I mean, it's really what flavor that company wants, but we're talking about like Puppet and Chef and
Okay.
things like that. And then there's all the different cloud technologies and things like that. So you're working with the different cloud technologies and OpenStack and things like that, but then you're working with Puppet to be able to automate the deployment of the apps and things like that. So there's a lot of different tools out there.
Okay.
I'd say the most prevalent are Puppet, Chef, and Ansible.
Okay.
But as far as uh, being a developer, you're going to work a lot with those DevOps people, and they're going to help you out with the deployment of those apps in a very scalable environment. So that's kind of what a lot of companies are doing, because they don't want and I'm kind of getting off on a tangent. This is almost another 30-minute conversation, but what they want is to be able to move at the speed of market, because the faster you get your awesome app to market, the better. And everybody wants to be efficient, and everybody wants to look like the Facebooks and the Googles and the Amazons and Apple and everything like that. And so they're trying to speed things up. And the way they do that is not by typical, network route switch jockeys where they're working with the physical network, but they're automating the provisioning of those networks and everything like that. So I could go on and on, but it's a long conversation, but that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Okay, cool. And then kind of on the flip side of this, what trends are you starting to see declining out there?
Cobalt.
Yeah.
No, if you really know Cobalt, there are people out there, but don't do that. But things that are declining are kind of a lot more companies are obviously moving to the cloud. A lot more companies are getting away from, the physical infrastructure. And so the more you get familiar with some of those OpenStack and open source technologies, the better, because they're going with a lot of the NoSQL databases now, just because it's easier and it's a lot more scalable, because that's the key, is scalability nowadays. And so we're moving away from a lot of the traditional databases and networks. And so getting familiar with those newer technologies that allow companies to have scalable solutions is going to be huge.
Okay. That's an interesting point. So as an entry-level guy just trying to get into the door, I guess there's a couple of ways you could play it, right? You could try to get ahead of the curve on these newest trending technologies, but there's also still a lot of legacy stuff out there.
Right. Definitely.
Which path do you think maybe gives them the greatest advantage? Try to get ahead of the curve on the newest stuff, or become a bit of an expert on legacy things to help out a company right now?
Right now, as a student in Coder Camps, your biggest goal, in my opinion, is to figure out the fundamentals. Don't worry too much about what the flavor of the week is in technology, but get really, really, really good at the fundamentals and the foundations of programming and computer science and things like that. And understanding, okay, if I do X, Y, and Z, this is how it's going to be able to scale. This is how it's going to interact with these other systems and things like that. But really figure out the fundamentals. That's the biggest thing, because there are a lot of people out there that assume that because they've gone through a boot camp, they automatically are a software developer that is very high caliber. But if you don't have the fundamentals, it's going to be found out very, very quickly. And you're going to have a much harder learning curve in the job market than if you figure that out now. And that's why you should be doing this GitHub stuff, so you can see those senior level developers. And even if it's just helping them with documentation or whatever, it doesn't have to be anything good, or huge. I mean, it has to be just getting yourself used to seeing these very high level developers and how they structure things, and figuring out how to get your code to that level. So just really, really pounding on the fundamentals, I think, is really, really key for now.
Yeah, I love that you say that, because that's so true. Getting the fundamentals down pat. Okay, here's another question, a little bit tougher.
Sure.
What's the biggest challenge getting someone with no experience in front of a company?
The biggest challenge is that it's the obvious. It's that they don't have any experience. And the way that you combat that is by doing those things that I've kind of mentioned, is really getting involved in those, in the GitHubs and everything like that. But so there's two people on LinkedIn that pop up in my feed all the time. And these two people are chronic job searchers, and they're also chronic crybabies, which is another issue on LinkedIn. But this one of the guys, he posted yesterday. I think he's sent out he paid somebody to do his resume, sent out 1,500 applications, has been looking for 16 months, and he got an interview and sat next to a guy who actually knew the manager. The guy that knew the manager got the job. And so the point is, you got to get not just on GitHub, not just on LinkedIn, but you got to get to the networking things, the meetups and things like that. And sometimes that can be intimidating, especially if you're an introvert.
Right.
But getting in front of the people that already work at these companies, getting in front of there might be a manager there that keeps seeing you show up to these meetups. So start now if you haven't done it yet, just so that way you can be recognized. If you go to an interview and all of a sudden you realize the manager that you're interviewing with is the guy that you've been sitting next to, or the gal that you've been hearing talk at these meetups, all of a sudden you have an in that other people don't. So I don't even remember what the original question was. Oh, trying to get into the market. That's the biggest thing, is building up your portfolio on GitHub and then getting out there and meeting with the people, because a lot of it is about who you know.
Okay, cool. One last question here, and I don't know if it's a fair one to ask. It might be hard to answer. How long can it take to place an entry-level candidate?
It depends. It depends a lot on a lot of different things. It depends on the company. It depends on the hiring manager in that company. It depends on the recruiting agency. If you're working with an agency, good turnaround time is between 1 and 2 weeks, but it's also not uncommon for it to be a lot longer. Sometimes it can be up to a month, depending on the company. And I used this example last time we talked. I had several people in talks with a guy out in Los Angeles. Typically it's 15-minute phone screen, on-site offer, but his wife had a baby, and that threw the entire timeline off. And so the biggest thing that you can do is not have all your eggs in one basket, but do whatever you can to get out there, because you don't want to rely on just one opportunity, and that one opportunity might take 3 months for you to get into the job, and those are 3 months that you could have been gaining on the job experience. And the longer you're unemployed, the harder it is to become employed. So yeah.
And one more thing that just popped in my head, because we were talking about this morning, me and another staff person here, for our demo graduation days, we're really trying to get people from the community to come out to get eyes on these guys for their demos, and and recruiters and people in the industry and all that. Someone asked the question, what value can recruiters get out of our demo day? And that's the thing that we're trying to figure out so we can really sell it, but on our end, we're kind of not really sure how to answer that question. And I'm kind of curious if you have any thoughts on that to help us out.
Yeah, so it's tough, because there are some really, really good recruiters out there. But if you scroll through LinkedIn for more than 5 minutes, there's going to be somebody complaining about a bad one, because there's a lot of bad ones out there too.
Sure.
And so I think kind of the similar thing as trying to find a job. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Reach out to a lot of them, the ones that actually care about the industry, about what they're doing in the tech space. I think they'll be interested. And the, I guess, value add for recruiters is that you're being able to network with people that 5 years from now you're going to have a relationship still, because you helped them with X, Y, and Z kind of thing. There might not be a ton of value up front in coming to these things unless you have 20 entry-level jobs that you're trying to fill. But the value is just being a part of the conversation. And I think the good recruiters and staffing firms and companies, they'll realize that and they'll be there.
On my end, I'm trying to foster relationships with the recruiters that are interested in the long game, kind of like what you're talking about, just get exposure to these guys now, because in a couple of years, they'll be, amazing talent to really place anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Because every job description needs 3 to 5 years. So
Okay, Chris. So we kind of went through several questions here. So I just want to kind of open it up to everyone out there. Um,
Oh,
See if they
oh,
have any questions
hold on
they
real
want to
quick.
ask.
Sorry about that. But thank you.
So do you guys have any questions you want to ask Greg while we got him on the line that you may have thought of?
Pretty good overview of everything.
Okay. You guys.
Kind of slow to think about already. Well, I mean, for us, the new.
Okay, I got one question way in the back. And go ahead, Jeff.
How did you end up in Springfield?
It's a long, not really a long story actually. So grew up in California, moved out to Arizona for a little while, moved back to California, then moved back to Arizona. My wife and I have moved once every year in our marriage. And we have 2 boys. If we would let them live in a mud puddle, they would. They're just, I mean, if you look up typical boys, this is who they are. But it's basically, we just wanted space. We wanted a place that we would be able to, we're outdoor people. So we're always outdoors. And so that's the big thing is we just wanted space really. And Springfield, we visited it, fell in love with it. And now we're here and planting roots and hopefully never have to move ever again because I'm tired of moving.
It's just unusual that a high technology recruiter would locate themselves in Springfield.
Well, that's the cool thing. So I'm remote. So there's not an office out here, but I can work and recruit from anywhere in the world. If I have Wi-Fi access, just like you guys, one of the cool things about getting into what you're doing is you can, for the most part, you could probably do what you're doing from anywhere in the world. We're very fortunate to be working for a company that allows that and encouraged it and said, go for it.
Is that in the Ozarks or?
Yeah, actually. So the town just south of us is called Ozark. We're at the very north tip of the Ozarks, but the Ozark Mountains are just maybe 45 minutes south of us in Arkansas. So
The people that work remotely, well, let me just ask.
Yeah.
Do you find that the lack of a more intimate interaction with people has, well, obviously you don't find it as an impediment, but you think that it could be an impediment?
It depends on the person. I mean, if you're a person that really, really, really thrives off face-to-face, if you're a really big extrovert, you could definitely see some problems. If you're not focused and you scroll through Reddit all day or YouTube or whatever, that could definitely be a big problem because you might need that structure. And so working from home or remotely is not for everybody. It works for me, I think, because I'm right on the cusp of extroverted. I'm actually, if I ever take I forget what that Myers-Briggs or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm always like 49% extroverted and 51% on the other. It's really weird. So I go in spurts. So it works for me. I don't have to be around people all the time, but it is nice to be able to have a place that you can go to. Or if you are remote, you got to figure out a way of getting out of your house, going to a coffee shop or a library or something where there is that energy, because it kind of breaks up the day and gives you that human interaction that you might not get if you're just, sitting at home in your room all day.
So you've mentioned the word introvert and extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
Is the personality fit of a person, is that in this industry, is that an issue? For example, it's my observation that managers tend to hire people that have the same personality of themselves. For example, if they're an extrovert, they feel more comfortable with other extroverts. If you're an introvert going into a company whose manager is an extrovert, is that a problem? Or has that,
So
yeah,
I don't think there's a problem between introvert and extrovert. I think there's a problem with soft skills, because being an introvert, you might get drained from being around high energy people or being in crowds and things like that, or you might not gravitate towards doing that. But managers, they, aside from tech skills or whatever, they look for the soft skills, somebody that is genuine, somebody that can have a conversation, that can easily explain the technology that they're working on, and things like that. If you're able to have a conversation, I think that is more important than whether or not you're an introvert or an extrovert, because like I said, I mean, there's a lot of really, really successful introverts out there, and you just got to practice the interviews, and that's something that you could. One of the great things about Coder Camps, get together with Jason or any of the other students and Google typical interview questions and practice at least a couple times a week, so that way you're comfortable answering those questions. Practice whiteboarding and walking through your thought process as you're whiteboarding, because the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll feel, even if you're an introvert.
so, just to go off on a tangent, you mentioned whiteboarding.
Sure.
Is that a big part of the interviewing process?
Yes. So not always, but it is something that if you have 5 interviews, at least a few of them are going to probably have that. And so you're going to need to get comfortable with it, because it's something that's been around as an interviewing tactic for a while, and I don't think it's going away. And sometimes you might be in an interview where you're doing it on a computer, which is a lot easier. But there are times you're just going to literally, it's going to be you, a marker, a whiteboard, and a couple people in the room saying, do this. And so you're going to have to, from start to finish, do it. And they might ask you questions while you're doing it. So the best thing for you to do is get comfortable doing that and being able to talk through what you're doing and answer questions while you're doing without losing your train of thought, because that's something that will definitely set you apart. Because there's a lot of people that I've interviewed that I know are really, really good, but they sucked at the whiteboarding part. They could have gotten the job, but because of the whiteboarding part, it looked like they didn't know what they were talking about, which is unfortunate, which is why you should practice now.
So, I'm sorry to hog the questions here. The whiteboarding process, my understanding in these interviews, the whiteboarding process is used to demonstrate how you address problems, your sort of how you conceive problems and how you would solve problems, and not as much as a specific technological solution like getting all the coding and the syntax right. Is that true, or is it or not?
Depends on the person on the other side of that interview. So some of them might be needing that to compile. And the way they do that, that's typically if you're doing it on a computer. Some of them, because they're senior level, they will immediately pick out, oh, forgot a semicolon there, whatever. And that might be a pet peeve of theirs. But a lot of times, like for example, one of the things that we do for one of our clients on the East Coast is we have a whiteboarding thing, and I don't remember what the exact problem is, and they don't care if you do it with for each or with link. What they care is why you did that. And so that the explanation point or explanation part of it, I think, is very important. But being able to make sure that you write code that does not have error is also a key part to it as well. So I mean, you got to get used to doing it.
Yeah.
Question: Can you ask the interviewer if they care about syntax or not? I think that depending on the problem, I think that's important. Or if you don't know what language you're programming in, can you say, do you care if I do this in syntax, or can I write it in plain English? how to solve those problems.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're in person doing an whiteboarding session with them, I would for sure figure out what it is that they're wanting, you know, asking, okay, how are you wanting me to solve this? There's a couple different ways. And they might be interested in, you know, seeing a couple different ways. And so without you knowing, you could do, like, for example, that one that I talked about on the East Coast, they could be looking only for people to solve it with Link. But you've start off with for each instead. And kind of laying that groundwork ahead of time, saying this is how we want you to do it, and asking those questions, I think is definitely important.
Yeah. I think that from experience on my side of it as an interviewer and, you know, giving the interview, don't assume pseudocode is okay. Just go right to strict syntax. But at the same time, don't feel like you have to write a whole class out with namespaces and using all this stuff. Those things are assumed. They probably just want to like focus right in on a method, parameters, and what happens in the body of that method, but not so much all the other stuff that's wrapped around that. That's what I've seen on my end. So is there any other questions you guys want to throw out here before we wrap it up? All right, Greg, thanks so much for talking again, man. This was awesome. A lot of great stuff here. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording.
Awesome.